Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem, welcome back to today's Daf, which is Eruvin Daf Lamed Gimel. We are 5 lines from the top at the 2 dots. The Mishnah discussed a case where a person places Eruv on a tree. The tree was situated in Rosh Hashanah, and this person decided to establish his Makom Shvisa, his place of residence, right at the base of that tree, right at the bottom of the trunk of that tree, which is Rosh Hashanah. And he placed the Eruv on the tree. Now this tree features a branch which extends away from the trunk more than 4 amas. So we have this 5 amma branch, which is starting from the trunk, and actually comes out at a low point, let's say 9 tfachim from the ground, which is within the airspace of Rosh Hashanah, and extends away from the tree, and it curves upward. It goes past 10 tfachim. So this branch begins at 9 and ends at 10. The Mishnah told us if he places the Eruv up on the upper portion of that branch on 10 tfachim, which is a Rishus HaYachid, then this Eruv is invalid because this fellow is in Rishus HaRabim down below, and the Eruv is up on top in Rishus HaYachid. It's 10 tfachim high, it's 4 tfachim wide. So his Eruv, his food, his bread, is not at the place of his Shvisa, and therefore cannot create a Makom Dira, an Eruv Tchumen. Whereas if he placed the Eruv on the lower portion of that branch, within 10 tfachim to the ground, which is the airspace of Rosh Hashanah, then that Eruv works, because this person and his Eruv are both situated in Rosh Hashanah. Hu ve'eruv Makom Echadu. Now, although the Eruv is on a tree, and he would have a problem removing the Eruv from a tree on Shabbos, what does that mean to use a tree on Shabbos? Well, following Shita's Rebbe, who holds that an Issa D'Rabbanan does not apply during Bein HaShmoshes, which is the twilight zone between Friday and Shabbos, which is the exact point where the Eruv is Chal. It takes effect and it's activated at that point, and therefore, since there's no Issa D'Rabbanan there to remove it from the tree, then he has full access to that Eruv, and the Eruv has been activated. Now, why does the Eruv need to be beyond 4 ames from the trunk of the tree? Why do we describe the branch as extending, for instance, 5 ames away from the tree? So the Gemara explains to us, because when a person establishes a Makom Shvisa, those 4 ames of his Makom Shvisa are treated like a Rishus HaYachid. We don't mean literally like it's enclosed with mechitzes with regards to carrying on Shabbos, but it means that it's his own personal space, it's his place of residence. Those 4 ames are considered his Makom Shvisa, and they are like a Rishus HaYachid, which extend upward all the way to the Rakia. So if you would place the Eruv right above that space, meaning in the airspace of his Makom Shvisa, then even if it would be way above 10 tefachim, be up in the tree up high, it would be okay because it's in the airspace of his Makom Shvisa. The problem here was that the Eruv was on this branch, which extended away from the tree, and it was not situated above the airspace of his Makom Shvisa. So if it's above 10 tefachim, it's a Rosh Hashanah away from him. If it's below 10 tefachim, then he's in Rosh Hashanah and his Eruv is in Rosh Hashanah. They're both in the same Rishus, and the Eruv works fine. Now, this depends on the machlekes, whether or not the Issa D'Rabbanan, the Isurim of Shvus, apply Ben HaShmoshes. Rebbe maintains the Rabban did not apply the Issa Shvus Ben HaShmoshes, therefore, during Ben HaShmoshes he has full access to his Eruv. Whereas according to Rabbanan, even Issa Shvus applies Ben HaShmoshes, and therefore this Eruv, even if it's below 10 tefachim, within the airspace of Rosh Hashanah, since it's sitting on a tree, it doesn't work because he can't access the food, he can't remove it from the tree. One is not meant to use a tree on Shabbos, even during Ben HaShmoshes. Says the Gemara 5 lines from the top, My Rebbe, Umay Rabbanan. Where do we find these 2 shittas? The machlekes Rebbe Rabbanan, whether or not there's an Isser Shvus during Bein HaShmosh. The Sanya. Nesane Be'ilan. This is getting back to our case where he put the Eruv on the tree, and his Makom Shvisa was meant to be at the base of the tree. Says the Bryce, it depends. L'mal l'masar tefachim, ein eruv Eruv. He placed the Eruv up on the tree beyond 10 tefachim, which is a Rishus HaYachid. Ein eruv Eruv. It doesn't work because the Eruv is in Rishus HaYachid, and this fellow is in Rishus HaRabim. L'mat l'masar tefachim. However, if the Eruv was on that portion of the branch which is below 10 tefachim, within the airspace of Rishus HaRabim, Eruv Eruv, then the Eruv is perfectly fine because he is in Rishus HaRabim and so is his Eruv. Vasa litle. However, on Shabbos itself, You're meant to know that he cannot actually remove the Erev from the tree. Because, although we're following Shitas Rebbe, that the Issa D'Rabbanan of using a tree does not apply Bein Hashmoshes, which is that very point when the Erev is activated. But on Shabbos itself, when it's Vadai Shabbos, Bein Hashmoshes is only Suffix Shabbos, therefore Shavuos doesn't apply, but Vadai Shabbos, he certainly can't make use of a tree. So you can't actually go ahead and remove the Erev from the tree on Shabbos. So the Erev works, but he can't remove it on Shabbos from a tree. So we discussed beyond 10, below 10. But if it's very low down, within 3 tefachim to the ground, well, we applied the concept of lavut, which means that in this case we view the ground as though it's extended upward and as though it's sitting on the actual karka. Anything within three tefachim is not reckoned with. So when you place it on the low point of that tree, within 3 tefachim to the ground, we view it as though it's not on a tree, as though it's sitting on the ground itself. And there's no issa, even with the Rabbanan, to remove the Erev from that tree. Not only is the Erev fine, well, but he can actually use it, remove it from the tree. So you have 3 cases. He placed it on the tree itself. If it's above 10, it's ineffective. If it's below 3, all agree it's fine. Even the Rabbanan would agree, because there's no issa whatsoever in using a tree within 3 tefachim to the ground. If it's anywhere from 3 to 10, so Rebbe tells us the Erev works, although you can't actually access the Erev on Shabbos. I'm going to see soon that the Rabbanan disagree, and they hold that since it involves using a tree, even during Ben HaShmoshes is Issa D'Rabbanan. Continues the Brayso with another case. Nisanebel Kal Kola. Let's say instead of placing the Erev on the actual tree, he hung it in a basket. V'tola bi'ilan, and hung the basket up on the tree. In this case, afilu la mala maser tfachim. Eruva Erev Divrei Rebbe. Even if it's above 10 tefachim, it works. Rashi explains that the Gemara soon will point out was speaking about. In this case of the basket, we're speaking about a tree which is not a Rosh Hashanah because the branch is not 4 tefachim wide. Therefore, there's no concern. The earlier concern doesn't apply because even if it's above 10 tefachim, it's not a Rosh Hashanah. So the Erev is not a Rosh Hashanah, and this fellow is not a Rosh Hashanah. He's a Rosh Hashanah, and therefore the Erev is activated. Divrei Rebbe, this is Shitas Rebbe, who holds that the Issa D'Rabbanan of using a tree does not apply Bein Hashmoshes. Let's perhaps take a look at Rashi inside. So it's just about in the middle of the column of Rashi, the middle of the Amud. It's 16 lines from the wide lines. So the Rashi lines on bottom widen. So 16 lines above that, to be exact. Beginning with the words Lamala Masora. So getting back to the beginning of the Brayso, he established his Makom Shvisa down at the base of the tree in Shus Harabim, and he placed the Erev up on the tree. So Brayso gave us 4 cases. Firstly, Lamala Masora in Erev. If he placed it above 10, the Erev is not valid. Ukudu Kimna Masnis. As we established the Pshat now Mishnah, he intended on establishing his Shvisa at the bottom, at the base of the trunk of the tree. And the branch was extending away from the trunk and heading upward. So this is the first case. If it's above 10, the Erev is in Rosh Hashanah. He's in Rosh Hashanah. He's removed from his Erev, and therefore the Erev is ineffective. We have the next case where the Erev was below 10 tefachim. In this case, Rebbe tells us it works. However, v'asur litlei, explains Rashi. Afilu haid l'mata masor asur litlei macha b'Shabbos. Even this Erev which is below 10 tefachim, tomorrow on Shabbos itself, he can't remove it from the tree. If he wanted to eat it, why? Because he's going to be using the tree. So despite this invitation, the Erev will take a hold during Ben Hashmoshes. Why? The kivan dishimush ilan shvus rabbanan. Since making use of a tree is only a shvus rabbanan, like gozral Ben Hashmoshes. This iser is not applied Ben Hashmoshes. We have a boy lemishkele. Hayishaitu matzi shakel. Now, if he would have liked to remove the Erev from the tree during that Ben Hashmoshes moment, he could have, and therefore the Erev has been activated. Concludes Rashi, Kol Isser Shabbos v'Yontiv, Davim Midrabanan Kari Shvus. Whenever we have a Isser Drabanan applicable to Shabbos and Yontiv, the Gemara refers to it as Shvus. Shvus means meant to rest and refrain from doing the Malacha. This is a term applied to Isser Drabanan. This was the second case. If it's above 10, certainly it won't work. If it's below 10, according to Rebbe, it's working, although he can actually remove the Erev. Pesach Gimel, this is the third case. If it's low down, within 3 tefachim to the ground, he placed it on the tree, within 3 tefachim to the ground. Not only does the Erev work, but he can actually make use of that Erev on Shabbos itself. Anything which is below 3 tefachim to the ground, afilu be'ilan, loy gazru alav, the Chachamim did not make it us. Karas smichta, it's like thick earth, meaning it's as though the ground is being elevated to that point. It's considered part of the ground. It's like it's sitting on the floor. Likewise, we learned in the last parak of the Masechta, it's Gimel. So we have a tree root. We have tree roots which are extending 3 tefachim from the ground. Well, he shouldn't sit on them, but if they're less than 3, then he can actually sit on them. So we have 3 cases. Above 10, below 3, all agrees mutter, and from 3 to 10, Rebbe says it's mutter. We have the 4th case where he placed it in a basket. In this case, even if it's above 10 tefachim, it works. Explains Rashi why. Soon the Gemara will explain. We're speaking about, in this case of the basket, we're speaking about that the tree is not Rosh Hashanah because it's not 4 tefachim wide. Therefore, even if he placed it above 10 tefachim, it's not situated in Rosh Hashanah. And this person who's down below in Rosh Hashanah and his Erev up above are not considered to be in 2 separate Rishuyos, and therefore the Erev is effective. Continues the Gemara. So this was Divrei Rebbe. V'chachamim oimrim, kol makom she'asa litloi ein eruva erev. Whenever there's an Isser to actually remove the Erev from the tree, then the Erev does not work. The Gemara will explain which case are the Chacham referring to. Chachamim oimrim ahaya. On which case are they referencing them, their shita to? Ilei ma'aseifa. Is it on the last case, where you place the Erev in a basket? So it's not actually using the tree itself. He put the Erev on a basket, and the basket's on the tree. So, if you would like to remove the Erev from the basket, is it a direct use of the tree? No, it's an indirect use. It's called studded. So the Chachamim, who tell us that, where he cannot actually access his Erev doesn't work, are they referring to the case of the basket? Ilei ma'aseifa. Why? Because they'll hold that even an indirect use of a tree is asur. And since they hold that even an Issa D'Rabban of using a tree applies ben hashmashes, so even in the case of the basket, there's an Issa to remove the Erev from the tree, ben hashmashes, and therefore the Erev is not chal, the Erev is not activated. Is that the Pshan D'Rabban? Lema, shall we say, Kasav Rabban, they hold stud and asurim, making use of a tree merely by way of stud and indirect use is also asur. That's problematic. Why? Explains Rashi, because it's actually a machlekes in the Gemara and Shabbos whether or not studim of a tree is asur. And we don't find that the Gemara there brings a raya from this brisa to the shita that stud and asurim. So apparently that can't be the true pshat in the brisa. It can't be that the Rabbanan's shita is based on studim asurim. It seems difficult to interpret in this manner. Says the Gemara, you're right. The Rabbanan are not speaking about the basket, because in that case, perhaps it would be mutter to remove the Erev from the basket, because we said that the basket is hanging on a tree which is not Rosh Hashanah. Right? Rashi says we're speaking about a tree. The case of the basket, we're speaking about a tree which is not 4 tefachim wide, so it's not Rosh Hashanah. And there's no problem other than the fact that he's actually using the tree, but removing an Erev from a basket is not direct use of a tree. So even according to Rabbanan, it's Rabbanan would apply ben hashmash. In this case, it wouldn't be a problem, because he can remove it freely from this tree ben hashmashes. Ela Reish. Apparently, when the Chachamim are responding to Rebbe, they say, well, when you can't remove the Erev from a tree, the Erev is not valid. They're referring to the Reisha, the first part of the Bryce, which was discussing a case where you actually put the Erev on the tree itself directly. And the Erev was anywhere from 3 to 10 tfachim. Right? If it's below 3, all agree it's mutter. It's like on the ground. If it's above 10, all agree it's also because it's in Rosh Hashanah. It was somewhere between 3 and 10. So Rebbe maintains that's a proper Erev because it's not a Rosh Hashanah. The fact that he needs to remove the Erev from the tree and make use of that tree, but Ben Hashmosh is no Isser. Whereas the Rabbanon disagree. They hold that Isser Shvus with the Rabbanon applies even Ben Hashmosh, which is a time of Suffolk. And therefore they maintain this Erev is invalid because in order for him to have access to this Erev, he must make use of that tree Ben Hashmosh. And that's Asr. And therefore, since he has no access to his food, the food can't be generating the Makom Shvisa, and therefore it's not an Erev. Okay, so in summary, we had a Brisa with 2 parts to the Brisa. In the first part, he placed the Erev on the tree itself. So if it's above 10 Tfachim, which is the Rosh Hashanah, all agree it's not an Erev. If it's below 3, all agree it's an Erev, because he can properly access this Erev. If it's from 3 to 10, of Machlekes, that involves the Rabbanon of making use of a tree during Ben Hashmoshes. Going to Rebbe, it's okay. Going to Rabbanon, it's not. We have the second portion of the Brisa, where he placed the Erev in a kalkola, the basket which was hung on that tree. And the Brisa seems to imply that according to all Shittas, it's mutter, because as Rashi said, the tree was not a Rosh Hashanah. And the Gemara tells us, using the tree in this manner, perhaps would it be Asr, it's called Stadin. And therefore, even if the Erev was Lamala Masar Tfachim, the Erev is Erev. We'll analyze the Brisa. Hi Ilan Hechidami. This tree that we just discussed, what type of tree are we speaking about? What size tree? Either Les Bi'ar Ba. If the tree is not 4 Tfachim wide, so there's no surface space of 4 Tfachim on that branch, Makam Pturu. It's an exempt area. It doesn't have a significantly sized surface, and therefore it's batal. It's batal to the Rosh Hashanah. Let's remember this tree is situated in the Rosh Hashanah. So why does the Brisa in the first case tell us, well, if you place the Erev on the tree above 10 Tfachim, the Erev can't work because it's in Rosh Hashanah. It's not Rosh Hashanah. The tree is a Makam Tur. There's no space of 4 Tfachim there. Apparently we're speaking about a tree that does have 4 Tfachim, and therefore it's a Rosh Hashanah. If so, how are we going to understand the second case of the Brisa, the case of the basket? What help is there when he places the Erev in a basket? You tell me, well, even if it's above 10 Tfachim, the Erev is Chal. Why? Why does the Erev work? Because it's in a basket. What do you mean? If the tree itself already has the proper surface area for Tfachim, so even if he placed the Erev in a basket which he hung on that tree, if it's above 10 Tfachim, it's Rosh Hashanah. Why? Explains Tosfos, because if the tree is Rosh Hashanah, so anything adjacent to the tree is called Chayre Rosh Hashanah. It's like the hole which is open to a Rosh Hashanah area. So although perhaps the hole itself is small in size, doesn't have a proper surface of 4 Tfachim, but if it's adjacent to Rosh Hashanah, it's considered to be part and parcel of that Rosh Hashanah usage area. So once you've established that this tree, this branch, is 4 Tfachim wide, which is a proper Rosh Hashanah, the basket as well is categorized and classified like Rosh Hashanah. So how could he place the Erev above 10 Tfachim? Amra, Vina, you're right. We're speaking about 2 different situations. Reishad is be'arba, the first part of the Brisa, which says you can't place the Erev up high on the tree. We're speaking about a tree which has 4 Tfachim, in which case it's Rosh Hashanah. However, Seifa, the case of the basket, the Les Barba, is speaking about that the tree itself, the branch itself, does not contain a surface space of 4 Tfachim, but the Les Barba, and therefore it's not considered Rosh Hashanah. And therefore, he can place the Erev there without any concern, even if it's above 10 Tfachim. V'kalkola mashlemas l'arba. Now, why did he bother placing it on the basket? So the basket actually completed the surface space into 4 Tfachim. So we're speaking about a branch which does not have 4 Tfachim surface. For instance, it only has 2 Tefach surface. And he put the Erev in a basket and placed it adjacent to that, hung it adjacent to that branch. And the basket, the surface space of the basket, for instance, is only 2 Tfachim. By attaching the basket to the branch, he completed a surface space. He created a surface space of 4 tefachim. Now, why is that necessary? The Gemara will explain for us, he's not creating a shayachid whatsoever. The 4 tefachim here is simply to enable the placement of the Eruv in that location. Explains the Gemara of a Rebbe who told us this halach in the Brayz, Savala Reb Meir, Savala Reb Yehuda. He holds like Reb Meir and Reb Yehuda. Explains the Gemara, Savala Reb Meir, he holds like Reb Meir, the Amar Chaykin Lahashlam. He holds like Reb Meir that we can virtually carve out something in order to complete the required surface size area. V'savala Reb Yehuda, he holds like Reb Yehuda, the Amar Be'inan Eruv, Al Gabi Mokamar Bovaleka. Yehuda maintains that if one places an Eruv up high in the air, you need to place the Eruv on some significantly sized surface area, 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim, to be a makam chashav. The Eruv creates a makam shvisa, creates a residence. It has to be sitting on something. It can't be just suspended mid-air. So that explains the Bryce. Why did he place the Eruv in the basket? Because Rebbe holds like both these sheets. He holds like Rabbi Yehuda that if you place an Eruv somewhere up in the air, it needs to be sitting on a significantly sized surface area. It needs to be 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim. And therefore, he attached the basket to the branch, thereby creating a joined surface space of 4 tefachim, which allows placement of that Eruv. But certainly it won't become a shayachid. Why won't it become a shayachid? Because Rashi explains, when you have proper machitzas here, the tree itself is only 2 tefach wide, so when down below, when it reaches the ground, there's no real wide shayachid, etc. Rashi goes into the detail why the Eruv, when it's placed in this configuration of the basket with the branch, is not really in a shayachid, but it is. You have accomplished a surface space of 4 tefachim to conform Rabbi Yehuda's shita. Now, there's one question remaining. How do you have a surface of 4 tefachim? The basket is only 2, and the branch is only 2. Says the Gemara, Rebbe holds like Reb Meir, that says Chaykikin Lahashlam. We carve out to complete a shear. Reb Meir is actually referencing the halach of mezuzah. So if we have a doorway which narrows on top, it's a domed doorway. So on bottom it's 4 tefach wide, but then it narrows, it rounds up on top. Reb Meir says if you have some wall surface up at the curvature area, which theoretically can be carved out to enlarge that doorpost, that doorway, to get 4 tefach wide, which is the proper shear of a doorway, then we say Chaykikin Lahashlam. We view that wall surface as though it's been carved out. Lahashlam, in order to complete, to extend the size of the doorway below it, to be mashlam to a proper shear. That's Shita Reb Meir. Says the Gemara, we're going to apply the concept here as well. If we have this branch, which is only 2 tefach, let's say, has a surface of 2 tefach on top, and he'd like to go ahead and complete it, to get 4 tefachim, to place his Eruv there. He's going to take a basket, put the Eruv in the basket, and attach it flush to that branch. Thereby, when the basket is at the side of that branch, you view the branch as though it's been carved out. By doing so, you've extended and enlarged the surface space of that basket. It's only 2 tefach, but you've extended it into the branch itself by virtually carving out that branch, which extends the surface space of the basket to complete a mokum chashav of 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim, which allows placement there. So this is the pshat in the case of the basket. We're speaking about that the tree itself is not a shayachid because there's no roich havdalah there. The reason why he placed it in a basket adjacent to the branch is in order to create a makam dalet, based on Rav Yehuda's requirement for makam dalet, and based on Rav Meir, that one can go and virtually carve out the branch to extend the surface area of the basket, which results in a makam dalet. Let's see the words inside again. From the top of the Amud. Rebbe Savalak Reb Meir, he also like Reb Meir, Savalak Reb Yehuda, Savalak Reb Meir D'Amar Chaykin Lahashlam. We can carve out to complete a required surface space. Savalak Reb Yehuda, he also like Reb Yehuda, who requires 4 tefachim. D'Amar Be'in and Eruv, Al Gabi Makam Arba. Generally, we require the Eruv to be placed on a place which is 4 tefachim, but like it. In this case, where the tree is not 4 tefachim wide, you don't have it. Therefore, he put a basket there So both together, you created a shear of Dalit. So in summary, just to go back to the Vraisa, how can you go ahead and place the Erev in a basket, which is up high on a tree, beyond 10 tefachim? Isn't it Rosh Hashanah? Says more, no. Ravina says no. We're speaking about a tree which is not Rosh Hashanah, and therefore there's no concern whatsoever. Says more, where do we find Rabbi Yehuda's requirement? My Rabbi Yehuda, the Sanya, Rabbi Yehuda. No, it's if he placed inserted a pole, a beam, right in the middle of Shus Harabim, and his Makam Shvisa is down below at the base of that Korah. And he placed his food, his bread, up on the top surface of that pole. If this beam is 10 tefachim high, meaning the top surface of that beam is 10 tefachim off the ground, and 4 tefachim wide, Eruv Erev, then it works, because you have a Makam Choshev. But otherwise, ein Eruv Erev, then it doesn't work. Let's take a look at Rashi inside, which is exactly 20 lines from the top of the Amud. Rashi begins with Hochigar Sinan. If the pole is 10 high and 4 wide, Eruv Erev, but otherwise, in Eruv Erev, it doesn't work. Explains Rashi. Problem is, if the Korah is 10 tefachim high and 4 tefachim wide, then the top surface is a shayachet. This fellow intended on creating his shrisa down below at the base of the Korah, which is shirab. How does that work? Says Rashi, what we've already said. We've already learned earlier. Whenever a person creates his Erev Tchumen, the 4 amis of that Makam Shvisa is considered his personal space, like a Rosh Hashanah, his personal residence. And that extends up until the Rakia. Therefore, when he intended on establishing a Shvisa at the base of that Korah, which is Rosh Hashanah, but since it's a Makam Shvisa, we treat it like a Rosh Hashanah, and it extends upward. And anything within that airspace, it's fine. So therefore, the Erev placed on top of that pole, which is directly above his Makam Shvisa, is perfectly fine. And it's only by the tree where we had the branch which was protruding past, away from the bark, away from the trunk, and extended away from his airspace, then we had a problem. The Gaba'ilan who the loy of Erev, over there by the tree, it was a problem. Like we established, because its branch extended away past 4 amas from his Makam Shvis. Like a life, Shaper Dami. But in this case, where there's no branches, then certainly it's fine. So if the pole is 10 high by 4 wide, then you're okay. Vim lav, but otherwise, ein Eruv Erev. Then the Erev is not effective. Why? Because the Gemara at this point figures, this is what Rav Yehuda means to say. Vim lav, but otherwise, meaning if it doesn't conform to both these specifications. Vim lav, the ein Gevaya Asara. If it's not 10 tefach high, or the surface space on top is not 4 tefachim wide, ein Eruv Erev. It doesn't work. Now, this seems to be puzzling. And that's why the Gemara responds with a kasha, with a wonder. What do you mean? You tell me, well, if it's not 10 tefach high, then it's a problem. If anything, just the opposite. Adrab, koshken the Eruv Erev. Certainly in this case, it should work. Let's say the pole is not 10 tefach high, so the Erev is below 10 tefach, within the airspace of Rosh Hashanah, which is his Makam Shvisa, and certainly it should work. So though it's sitting in Rosh Hashanah because it's in the airspace of Rosh Hashanah. So why should we just say, well, you place it on a pole, and the pole is 10 tefach high, and 4 tefach wide, then it's fine. But if it's any less than that, it's less than 4, or it's less than 10 in height, then you have a problem. What do you mean? If it's less than 10 in height, then it's within the airspace of Rosh Hashanah, and certainly it should be all the more reason for it to work. Let's see the Gemara again inside. So Rav Yehuda says, if it's it's Korah, right? If it's 10 tefach high, 4 tefach wide, it works. Vim lav. So this is 6 lines from the top. Vim lav. Otherwise, ein Eruv Erev, it doesn't work. The Rabbi says, well, just the opposite. If it's below 10, huve Eruv Makam Echadu. This fellow and his Erev are are present in the same exact location. They're both in Rishis Harabim. So what's the problem? Elochi Kamar. This is what Rida meant to say. Kavaya Asar. If the beam is 10 tefach high, Sorach Shei B'Rosh Arba. Because if it's that high, it's beyond the reach of Rishis Harabim. So it's up in the air. You need to have a surface space of 4 tefachim to give it a makam chashiv, so that the air was placed in a significantly sized area. Ein Gvoy Asara, but if the pole is not 10 tefach in height, in which case the air is situated within the airspace of Rishis Harabim, then there's no concern. It's as though it's sitting down below on the surface of Rishis Harabim, on the ground. You don't need that the beam should necessarily be 4 tefach wide, because the air is sitting down below on the floor. In this case, there's no need that there should be 4 tefach on top of this pole. So this is Rabbi Yehuda's shita. We were looking for the source where we have Rabbi Yehuda's concept. It's right here. That you must place the erev on a significantly sized area. Rashi calls it a makom choshev. So if we have this beam in Rishis Harabim, if the beam is 10 tefach high, so it's up in the air, it's not within the airspace of Rishis Harabim. In this case, you need to have a makom choshev on top, 4 tefach. But if the pole is within 10 tefach of Rishis Harabim, in which case we view the air as though it's sitting down below, so it's sitting on the Rishis Harabim. Ein tzorech shei b'rosh ha'aba. There's no need to have 4 tefach on the top of the beam. Continues the Gemara. Let's go back to the Brisa, which told us that when we have the erev up high on the tree in a basket in a kalkala, there's no concern. Why? Because we were speaking about a tree which is not a Rishis Yachid. It's not 4 tefach wide. And the kalkala was simply trying to complete the shear of the tree, meaning to grant us a surface space of 4 tefachim. As we just learned, Rabbi Yehuda requires a makam chash. Now, the fact that we don't consider this arrangement of the basket which is tied to the tree like a Rishis Hayachid, right? That's pretty obvious. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to put the erev up there. It says, well, come on, whose sheet is this following? The Loiker Rabbi Yehuda. Apparently, this is in disagreement with Rabbi Yehuda, who maintains that such an arrangement would create a Rishis Hayachid. The Sanya, Rabbi Yehuda Aimer, no, it's Kana B'Rishis Harabim. One established a Kana in Rishis Harabim, V'niach b'rosh traskel, and he placed a traskel, which is a large-sized basket, on top of that pole. So he inserted a pole, a narrow pole, in Rishis Harabim, took a traskel, which has the configuration of Rishis Yachid. It's 4 tefach wide, 10 tefach high, placed it right on top of that pole. So the pole here is supporting a very large traskel. Says Rabbi Yehuda, you meant to know that the top of that traskel is the Rishis Hayachid. Why? Although down below, at the Rishis Harabim point, this pole is very narrow. It's not 4 tefach in width. But since the basket on top, which is being supported by that pole, has the proper configuration of Rishis Hayachid, it's 4 tefach wide, 10 tefach high, we take those mechitzas and we say, good achas, cut them and bring them down. Have them descend downward and enclose the area around that pole. Create an enclosure of 4 tefachim, which creates a Rishis Hayachid. So apparently, says the Gemara, the Brisa here, which allows us to use the basket, which is attached to that branch, and we don't consider that a Rishis Hayachid, despite the fact that the top surface of that area is 4 tefach wide, and the whole area is 10 tefach high, we don't consider that a Rishis Hayachid. Apparently, this is not consistent with the Rabbi Yehuda, because according to him, we should view those mechitzas as though they descend downward and created a fully enclosed area all the way down to the floor below. So Rabbi Yehuda says that he takes a kana, puts a traskel, v'zorok nachal gabav chayiv, throws on top of that, onto the top of that basket is chayiv because we consider Rishis Hayachid. So apparently, it's inconsistent with our Brisa. Says Mafilu Tema, Rabbi Yehuda. You know what? You could even say that our Brisa regarding our basket with the tree is following Rabbi Yehuda's shita. There's a big difference between 2 cases. In our case, he would agree that it's not a Rishis Hayachid. Why? Hasam, over there in the case of the basket on the pole, where the basket is being supported by the pole and extending over the pole on all sides. In this case, we can say that the mechitzas of that basket extend downward around the pole, and it's as though they enlarge the pole and they create a makom of dalet tfachim on bottom. As opposed to our case, we can't say that. Why? Because the basket is not sitting on something. It's adjacent, it's attached sideways to this branch. Now, we discussed earlier, how does this work? First you have to say choykikin. You have to go ahead. How do you create a surface area of 4 tefachim on top? You need to virtually carve out that branch. That's how you get 4 tefachim. That's step number 1. Now after you have that, then you're going to have to say good achaz and bring down those mechitas downward. A 2-step process we can't do. We can't pull down virtual mechitas. When you have a proper basket with a proper mechitza sitting up in the air, we can take those mechitas and pull them down. You have something to pull, you have something to extend downward. But in this case, where the basket is stuck on the tree, you don't even have a properly configured area there, a properly configured floor space there. You first need to carve things out. So the whole thing is just a virtual thing. It's not a true mechitza yet. You need to carve it out and then you'd like to pull it down. You don't say that. You don't say a double-step process. Real mechitzas can be pulled down, but virtual mechitzas cannot. That's the teres of the Gemara. Says the Gemara, even if our brisa follows Rabbi Yisrael, there's a big difference. In the case of the basket on top of the pole, the mechitzas are surrounding the pole and can be pulled downward. In the case of the basket on the tree, there are no mechitzas around the branches, meaning you first have to create a proper surface area by carving out that tree. That cannot be pulled downward. You can't say carve and pull down, because it's not a real mechitzah. So in summary, our Mishnah can't follow Reis Rabbi Yehuda. There's a difference between both cases. Let's get back to the case of the basket. Rabbi Yehuda is going to give us another approach. We had a kasha. How can one place an eruv on a basket which is situated way up, beyond 10 tefachim? What about Rosh Hashanah? Why? Why don't we consider that eruv to be sitting in Rosh Hashanah? So Ravina told us because the tree did not have the proper surface area. It wasn't 4 tefachim wide. Therefore, it wasn't Rosh Hashanah. Rabbi Yirmiyah will give us another teretz. Rabbi Yirmiyah Amar, even if the tree is Rosh Hashanah, it has a surface area of 4 tefachim. Let's not split the brisa. The entire brisa there is describing the same type of tree, a tree which is Rosh Hashanah. So why does the brisa allow one to place the eruv in a basket, which is up high on the tree? Ravina Amar, Shani Kalkala, a basket is different. Hoyil v'yachal and toisa. Since he has the ability, during Ben Hashmoshes at least, to tip that basket, tilt it downward. V'yachal and toisa lohavia, and bring it l'toich hasara, to within the 10 tefachim of the ground below. So although currently the eruv is sitting in a basket, which is a Rosh Hashanah, because it's up on a tree, which is Shayachid, but since it's a long basket, a large size basket, which can be tipped downward, so once he has that ability to be nigh to that basket, and that will result in his loaf of bread descending below the 10 tafach point. It's going to come from Rosh Hashanah down below 10 tafach, which is now a karmelis. And therefore he has access to his bread during Ben Hashmoshes, because he's in Rosh Hashanah. His bread is in the karmelis, which involves only an Issa D'Rabbanan. Transfer from one to the other is only Issa D'Rabbanan, and during Ben Hashmoshes there's no Gzera D'Rabbanan, according to Ravi. Therefore, the Brisa tells us that this eruv is valid. So according to Rav Yemer, certainly we're speaking about a tree which is Shayachid. Why placing an eruv in a basket improves matters? Because the basket allows him to access it by tilting that basket, bringing it downward until the bread is within the airspace of Rosh Hashanah. And since it's in a basket, it's considered in a karmelis, because it's an area of 4 tefachim, which is below 10, so it's called a karmelis. He can access it from where he is, and therefore the eruv is valid. Rav Yiri Amar Shani Kalkola is different. Hoyel v'yochel and toisa. You can tip it, v'lavil techasor, and bring it to within 10 tefach. Continues the Gemara. So once we apply this concept of hoyel, since you theoretically can have access to your bread, that's enough to activate the Erev, we're going to have a kash on that. Yasser v'apapa v'ka'amar lo shmaita. Papa was sitting and saying over this halacha that hoyel can apply to an Erev. Esvei Rav Bar Shavel Rav Papa. He asked the Makash from the Mishnah, which seems to indicate that we don't apply the concept of a hoyel. A theoretical access to Erev is not sufficient to activate the Erev. The Mishnah tells us that if a person would like to establish an Erev Tchumen, in a situation where we have a Yom Tov followed by a Shabbos. So we have Friday's Yom Tov and then followed by a Shabbos. He'd like to have an Erev Tchumen for both days, to be used for Yom Tov and for Shabbos. And he'd like to use the same piece of bread. He doesn't want to leave it out there. If he leaves it out there during the first night, meaning at the onset of Yom Tov, if he leaves it out in the wilderness, perhaps it's going to disappear. So the Mishnah gives us good advice. Case of how is he meant to do it? Malicha Barishan. So on the first day, meaning Erev Yom Tov, this is Thursday, he brings his food out to the Erev site. Waits until nightfall when the Erev takes effect. So now he has the Erev Tchumen for the first day, which is Yom Tov. And he can go ahead and bring back the food to Bala and comes home. B'Sheni, on the next day, which is Yom Tov, which is Erev Shabbos. So he brings it again to the Erev site, wait until darkness, and eats it right there, he can't carry it home on Shabbos. And returns home. So now he has taken the same piece of bread and applied it to the Erev for Yom Tov, and also for the Erev for Shabbos. Says Maramai, why does a person ever need to trouble himself to actually bring his food out to the Erev site? Namely, we should say, Hoyel. We should say, since theoretically he has the ability to take this food which he designated for the Erev purposes, and bring it out to the Erev site, that should be sufficient to generate the Makam Shvis out at the Erev site, because of oil. Just as in the case where, since he has the ability to tilt the basket and bring his bread over to the Makam Shvisa, we say it works. Because theoretical access to the food is sufficient to generate the place of residence. So why would a person ever have to actually bring his food out to the Makam Erev? Why can't he just leave it at home? Amai. Why? Namely, we should say, since if he would want, he can certainly bring that food out to the Makam of the Shvisa. If so, even if he didn't actually bring it, let's view it as though he actually brought it out there. Omar Abzeru, you're right. Generally speaking, there's no requirement to bring your food out to the Erev site. However, why did the Chacham require? Due to a unique circumstance. Gzeira, Misham Yom Tov, Shechal Liyas Achar Shabbos. We're concerned about a case where Yom Tov follows Shabbos. So Yom Tov came out on Sunday. Now he'd like to have his Erev implemented for Yom Tov. In this case, there's no Hoyel, because unless he actually has the food out there prior to Matzah Shabbos, when it's meant to take effect for the following day, which is Yom Tov, unless the food is actually there, he has no ability to bring it, because it's Shabbos, he can't carry on Shabbos. So in this scenario, Hoyel wouldn't work. Generally speaking, your standard Erev, for instance, your typical Shabbos, where Friday is an ordinary weekday. Of course, in this case, there's no real requirement to have the food out there, because Hoyel, if he would like, he would have the ability to bring the food out there on Erev Shabbos. He can carry on Erev Shabbos. Therefore, he can leave his food at home. But when it's Yom Tov, which follows Shabbos, so the Erev which is meant to take hold for Yom Tov, needs to be brought to the site prior to Yom Tov, prior to nightfall, which is actually Shabbos. In this case, he has no ability to carry the food from his home, so Hoyel would not apply. In this case, he requires to have the food out there at the site. So based on this concern of this scenario, Chacham required that every Erev Tchumen, the food should actually be present at the Makam Shvis. Let's take a look at Rashi. The top line of the Amid here, Amar of Zera, explains Rashi, Hadis Rabbanan. This that the Chacham required the Kol Ma'arvin, all those who established the Erev Tchumen, Maseches Eruvin, the Makam Shvis, to actually bring their food to the Erev site. Gzeru Shem Yom Tov Achar Shabbos. It's a Gzeru concern for this case where Yom Tov follows Shabbos, which in this case Hoyel wouldn't be applied. The Iboilam Tui b'Shabbos la'arav liyom amrachos, because if he would want to bring it on Shabbos, in order to establish the Erev for Sunday, which is Yom Tov, has no ability to do that, because Shabbos you can't carry it. But Tzarech Alichem Erev Shabbos, in this case certainly he would have to bring it to the site from before Shabbos. So based on this situation, Chacham broadly applied a requirement to every case. V'amras ba'alma. If you would say that elsewhere, nishbekei bebeisei can leave the food at home mishum hoil, based on this hoil concept, hachanami in this case as well, where Yom Tov follows Shabbos, also mismachlei, he might rely on this concept. He won't differentiate. V'nafik ala ruv shvisasa b'Yom Tov Shabbos. I'm going to rely on this eruv, even when Yom Tov follows Shabbos. V'hasna afilu hoil leka. In that case, the concept of hoil would not apply, because he cannot transport the food on Shabbos. So based on that concern, Chacham required that every eruv should have the food actually present at the Makom Shvisa. But theoretically speaking, hoil would apply, and therefore Rav Yirmiyah's pshat is correct. If this fellow can go ahead and tilt the basket over to his location, that is enough to activate the eruv. Okay, time for a brief review of today's daf. We had a brisa and two parts to the brisa. The brisa began with an eruv placed on the actual tree. We have three cases. If the eruv was above 10 tefachim, which is eruv sayachid, the eruv doesn't work because he's down below Ushus Harabim. His eruv is up above. They're not in the same location. The eruv can't generate the Makom Shvisa, which is generated by the food. If the eruv is on the tree, but it's below 3 tefachim, within shloisha to the karka, that's considered like karka. All agree that eruv is fully activated, ben hashmashes, because he has full access to that food. Even the Rabbanan would agree, one can use a tree within 3 tefachim to the ground. The problem will be if the eruv was anywhere from 3 to 10 up on that tree. Now we have a machlekes. So although it's not a Rosh Hashanah, but he's going to actually have to use that tree. So according to the Chachamim, the eruv doesn't work because he has no access to the food during Ben Hashmashes. Because Issa D'Rabbanan, whereas according to Rebbe, in this case it would work. Because he holds Kol Davar Shom Mishum Shvus Like Gozel Ben Hashmashes. Chacham did not apply the Issa Shvus Ben Hashmashes, which is the very point when the eruv takes effect. And since at that moment he has access to his food, the eruv is chal, it takes hold, and it works for the entire Shabbos. We had the second part of the brisa, which discussed eruv placed in a kalkol in a basket, which was hanging up on the tree, beyond 10 tefachim. The brisa says it works. We have two interpretations of the brisa. We have Ravina's approach, who says, well, in this case, apparently the tree was not a shayachet. It was narrower than 4 tefachim. He placed the eruv in a basket, which was hung on that tree. There's no shayachet concerns, and therefore the eruv and the person are considered to be in one and the same rishus. Why did he place it on this basket? More explained for us. Because the eruv placed up in the air needs to have a makam chashiv. How did you get the makam chashiv? By virtually carving out the branch of the tree to create that surface area. But in any case, there's no shayachah there. And the Gemara told us because even according to Rabbi Yehuda that a basket placed on a pole is considered shayachah, that's unique to that case. Because over here, it's different, that you have to employ both concepts. You need to virtually carve out the branch and then bring down those mechitzas. That's too much to say. According to Rav Yirmiyah's approach, the reason why the basket was fine was certainly we're speaking about a tree which is a Rosh Hashanah, has 4 tefach of surface. The reason why it works is because when something is in a basket, he has the ability to bend the basket downward, to tilt it down, and bring the bread up from the Rosh Hashanah down below 10 tefachim. This gives him access to the eruv, employing the concept of hoyel.